Welcome back to the garage. I've made an executive decision. I am not going to rethread the long holes. I got all the short ones done. My reasoning behind this is I can't see, I've looked at all of the long holes. There's nothing wrong with the threads. The long ones have like over a ½ inch more thread than the short ones. So the short ones were always the weak link. And they've always been the ones, I've had these heads off several times and they always felt mushy when you were putting the bolts back in. And I always assumed it was the way the torque to yield bolt was on those because they were all threaded from top to bottom. And now I realize that it was just threads pulling out. But there's nothing wrong with these threads. And when you do these inserts, you're threading the entire hole. That gives you a lot more rough surface area in the holes, which probably will never cause an issue, but in my mind that could cause a crack possibly. It's more likely to cause a crack than a smooth bore on these long holes. So plus the fact that it's a lot of work, and on top of that it is more opportunity to screw up because I've got a bunch of the long ones that if I wanted to do them I'd have to do all of them. And any one of them, you could break a tap, you could screw up the threads, you could cause a problem fixing something that's not an issue anyway. So, short ones are done. I'm waiting on the thread locker to cure, and then we can put the studs in and get the heads back on this thing. But not going to do the long ones. Plus, it's also a good opportunity having to do that many of them and that much shavings to just get more crap in my new engine. So, just not going to do them. Like I said, the short ones were the problem. They've always been the problem, and they're fixed. So next up, we're going to put some studs in, get the heads back on. We are ready to put the last head on. I went ahead and put one on with the ARP studs to make sure I knew what I was doing. Everything came out looking really good. No issues with completely torquing down the ones that I had left with aluminum threads. The small ones that stripped out earlier with the new inserts, torqued down just perfect. So let's get the other head put on. I'll show you how it's done. So like normal, the deck surface needs to be completely clean and oil free. So we'll wipe it down again. So I got anything on it from, well, I'm sure I got stuff on it from tapping those holes. Next up, we'll put the alignment pins back in. Now, just like putting on the head with the normal bolts, all the holes have to be perfectly clean, perfectly dry, as far as not having any standing solution in them that could hydro lock and end up cracking your block. We'll install these small studs across the top first. They have a stop. They've got a little stop on the end of them, so install them hand tight. Well, you can use a wrench, but don't torque them down into place. Just run them till they stop and you're good. The ARP lubricant is a good anti-seize, and it doesn't call for this, but I put a little bit on the threads that go down in the block just to keep stuff from seizing up since it's an aluminum block. Now the ARP instructions said to put the head on and then screw all the studs in. And it's just like, that seemed like it would be more difficult than putting them in like this. I went ahead and put the studs in first on the other side, then dropped the head on there. Didn't have any problem. See, it's bottomed out, back it up just a touch. But you don't need these torqued in place. They're just fully screwed in. Now we'll move on to the big studs. Same as before, they have a stop on the end, so run them in till it hits the stop. I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of the ARP stuff on the threads that go in the block just to use as an anti-seize. All the bolts in the LS are a blind hole, so you don't have to worry about putting a sealant on the threads. It's not like anything's going to leak out. I just don't want them to seize into the block. So there's the bottom, and that's good. Last two are the short studs going into the inserts. Now I'll give everything a final look. Now I'll set the head gasket on. These Velcro head gaskets are marked front. This is the front of the engine, so we'll set that down on there. Put it on the alignment pins. Everything looks good. Now we can work on the head just a little bit. Okay, for these to torque down properly, the spots on the head where the washer's set need to be absolutely clean and oil free. I'm going to go through with brake clean. Clean those off, and we'll dry them off with some compressed air. Okay, turn the head around and we'll degrease the bottom side. Ensure it's all clean. No oil on it, so the head gasket will seal good. Okay, the head's all nice and clean. Now it's time to put it on the block. And this is probably why they told you to put the head on first and then put the studs in, to make sure you don't ding up the head surface on the studs. But just be careful when you slide it on there and you won't have any trouble. So now the head's on there. Now we need to work on the washers, because the washers that come with this have a textured side and a smooth side. And see how it's a little oily? We need to clean all the oil off of the washers. The textured side goes against the head, that way it won't rotate. It will kind of dig in and stay put. And then we'll lube the bottom of the nut where it meets up against the flat side of the washer, and we'll get accurate torque. So I'm going to clean all these off and put them on the head. Okay, all the washers are cleaned and dried, texture side toward the head. And just drop them on each stud. There we go. Wasn't quite down on there. I degreased the small washers for the top. They do not have a textured side, so they can go on either direction. Get those on there. I'm going to go through and put some ARP grease. Comes with the stud kit. It's their special torque grease. Put it on the threads and apply it to the surface on the nut. Same thing with the large studs. We'll lube up the threads some. Then we'll lube up the base of the nut and get a little more in the threads there. And then the nuts are ready to go on. And now they're all on there, I'm going to take them down just to snug. All right, we are ready to install now. The torque sequence is the same as if you were using the torque yield bolts. And as you can see over here, we don't use the angled gauge anymore. We just do the big ones in 3 steps, 25, 50, and 80 foot-pounds, and then do the small ones afterwards to 28 foot-pounds. So let's do the first pass at 25. And I'm using my small 3/8 inch drive torque wrench for this first pass and the second pass, since it'll be more accurate at these lower torque settings. Then when we go to 80 foot-pounds, that's the maximum of this wrench. We'll go to the bigger one because you want to keep your torque more in the center of the range of your wrench. Anytime you get to extremes on a torque wrench, you lose accuracy. I don't usually like to use an extension on a torque wrench if you can keep from it. Those bolts are so far down in there you really can't avoid it. Now what I do is just put my thumb here on the side of the head because it actually pivots here when it reaches the torque, just to give it some support and bring it to the required torque. All right, we'll take this up to 50 foot-pounds. There's 50. Same sequence again. One, two, three, four, five. I'd say the mailman's here. Okay, for the last pass at 80 foot-pounds, I'll switch to the bigger wrench. All right, for all the marbles, 80 foot-pounds. One. Two. Now for the two shorties. Nine. 10. Nothing stripped out. I'm going to run back through these one more time since that is the last torque. No movement. All right. Now, the last four at 28, or the last five at 28 foot-pounds. Start in the middle, number 11. And I'll go back through since these are one pass at one torque setting. All right, that's it. Now, like I mentioned in the last video, I did not put the thread inserts in any of the long, deep holes. I left them aluminum, but since they have more thread from the factory than what the two short ones did, they, just like always, they held just fine. They felt perfect as I was torquing them down. There wasn't any feel that they were trying to pull the threads out. So I'm glad I did not go through and put inserts in all of the holes. Just went through the four short ones. So everything looks good. I'm real happy with the inserts that I put in. I'm happy with the ARP head bolts, or head studs. Well, the next video should be, I'll probably, before I put the rockers on, I'll do the rope thing. Since the valves are all closed, I'll put the harmonic balancer pulley back on, get it torqued down. Then we'll put the rockers on, and then the motor will be complete and ready to go back in. Well, it'll be a complete long block. It'll be ready to go back in the car. Won't put the valve covers on yet because remember they were interfering with the firewall coming out, so I'll just leave them off till I get the motor set down in there. Probably cover them up with a little plastic and tape. Other than that, she's looking good. Now that this problem is fixed, it should be start making some good progress getting this back in and getting the car back on the road, because I've been working while I was waiting on the parts this week. I've been working on the wiring. I've almost got it done. I've got to do a little more on it on the wiring, and then I've got one brake line I've got to delete and reroute a couple of things on the brakes, and then it's just some cleaning underneath the car. Oh, I still need to check out the torque tube, make sure the bearings are good in it. But it's getting real close to putting this back in there. So, till the next video, thanks for watching.